Something strange is happening in America right now. Millions are suddenly searching one name, Jesse Jackson. He didn't pass away. He didn't make a political comeback. So why is an 80-year-old civil rights leader dominating modern internet trends? Because viral clips are forcing a new generation to ask a powerful question. Did the road to Barack Obama actually start decades earlier with him? Tonight, we break down the man, the movement, and the forgotten campaigns that reshaped U.S. politics. And if you want more real stories behind the headlines, support the channel. Subscribe right now before we start. Let's start with the question millions of Americans are quietly typing right now. Is Jesse Jackson still alive? And how is his health? And honestly, this isn't gossip searching. This is emotional searching. Because for many Americans, Jesse Jackson isn't just a political figure. He's a living memory of another era. A time when protests weren't hashtags, they were risks. When leaders didn't just speak, they stood on the front line. In recent years, he stepped away from public life after revealing he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Since then, every time a photo appears, every time he shows up at an event, the internet reacts the same way. People pause. They look closely. They search his name. Not because of scandal, not because of controversy, because they want reassurance. They want to know, is he okay? And that's what makes this trend powerful. We're watching history age in real time. A man who once marched with crowds now moves slower, speaks softer, but still represents a generation's fight for equality. Now comes the bigger question younger Americans are asking. Why was Jesse Jackson actually important? Because if you're Gen Z, you didn't grow up seeing him on TV every week. You didn't watch the speeches live. You only see short clips online, and honestly, without context, he just looks like another activist from history. But to millions of Americans, he wasn't just an activist. He was a political force. See, before modern diversity in national politics became normal, there were invisible barriers in America. You could protest, you could march, but reaching real political power? That was different. Jackson changed that equation. He didn't stay outside the system shouting at it. He stepped inside it and tried to run it. That's why older Americans react differently when they hear his name. They remember a time when his campaigns weren't symbolic, they were serious. He negotiated with presidents, influenced party platforms, and brought communities into elections that had never felt represented before. So the real answer to the question isn't simple. Was he an activist? Yes. But he was also something more dangerous to the old political order, a bridge between protest and power. And that's exactly why a new generation is rediscovering him now. Because once you understand that role, modern American politics suddenly makes a lot more sense. Younger viewers are discovering him for the first time. Older viewers are remembering who he was, and quietly realizing time is moving forward. This isn't breaking news. It's something more human than that. It's a country checking on one of the last living voices of its civil rights past. To really understand him, you have to go back even further, before the elections, before the speeches, before the national fame. People online keep asking, what was his real connection to Martin Luther King Jr.? Was Jesse Jackson just inspired by Dr. King, or was he actually there? The answer matters, because in American history, there's a difference between someone who studied the movement and someone who lived inside it. Jackson wasn't watching the civil rights movement from a distance. He was physically present during its defining moments, organizing, marching, negotiating, sometimes standing only steps away from danger. Not as a spectator, but as part of the inner circle of young leaders learning directly from King's strategy of nonviolent pressure. And this is why old footage keeps going viral. When viewers see him beside King in archival videos, the timeline suddenly becomes real. The past stops feeling like a textbook and starts feeling like memory. People want to know his exact role, not mythology, not exaggeration. Was he a spokesperson? A student? A future successor? In reality, he was something in between, a field organizer who learned how moral protest could transform into political leverage. So this search trend isn't controversy, it's education. A new generation realizing that history isn't just dates and speeches. It's a chain of people, and some of them are still alive to remind us it actually happened. Now this is the part that shocks younger viewers the most. Did Jesse Jackson really run for president and actually come close? For a lot of Americans discovering him today, the assumption is simple. Civil rights leaders protested, politicians governed. Two separate worlds. But in the 1980s, Jackson blurred that line completely. In 1984, and then again in 1988, he didn't run a symbolic campaign. He ran a competitive national campaign inside the Democratic Party, traveling state to state, winning primaries, and building a coalition that political strategists had never seen before. Young voters, minorities, working-class communities, groups that historically felt outside the process, suddenly had a candidate speaking directly to them on a national stage. And the numbers surprised the establishment. He didn't just appear on ballots. He won states. He didn't just debate. He influenced the party platform. So when people ask, how close did he get to the White House? The real answer isn't measured only in delegates or votes. He changed who was allowed to compete for the White House. Because after his campaigns, American presidential politics could never return to its old boundaries. The idea of who could realistically run and be taken seriously expanded permanently. That's why this search matters today. Once you realize he wasn't a side figure in politics, but an actual contender, modern elections suddenly look less accidental and more like the continuation of a story that started decades earlier. Now we reach the question that really drives the modern debate. Did Jesse Jackson help make Barack Obama possible? On social media, this has turned into more than history. It's almost a political origin story. Because when Americans look back at the timeline, they notice a pattern. First came the civil rights movement, demanding legal equality. Then came Jackson's campaigns, demanding political viability. And decades later came Obama, achieving national victory. Before Jackson, a black presidential campaign was often seen as symbolic, important morally, but not realistically competitive nationwide. His runs in the 1980s changed that perception. He didn't just argue that representation mattered. He proved millions of voters would actually support it inside mainstream elections. And that psychological shift mattered more than any single vote count. By the time Obama appeared on the national stage years later, the country had already experienced the idea once. The unfamiliar had become familiar. The impossible had become imaginable. So commentators today aren't saying Jackson caused Obama's presidency. History is never that simple. They're saying he prepared the political environment for it. He normalized the concept of a coalition that crossed race, age, and class lines, the same type of coalition Obama would later build successfully. That's why viewers are searching this connection. They're not just asking who each man was individually. They're asking how one era quietly built the foundation for the next. So after all of this, the final question people keep asking is the simplest one. Why is Jesse Jackson trending right now? There's no scandal, no breaking news alert, no major announcement. And that's exactly what makes this moment different. The internet didn't react to an event. It reacted to memory. Old archival clips started circulating again. Speeches from decades ago suddenly appeared in modern feeds, placed next to today's protests, today's debates, today's political language. And viewers noticed something unsettling. The conversation sounded familiar. Not identical, but familiar. Younger audiences began discovering him not as a textbook figure, but as a person speaking into problems they still recognize. Older audiences started comparing eras, asking whether leadership styles have changed or just the platforms delivering them. This isn't outrage-driven trending. It's reflection-driven trending. Americans are essentially holding two timelines side by side, the past and the present, and trying to understand what carried forward and what didn't. That's why the searches keep growing. People aren't only learning about the man anymore. They're measuring today's activism against yesterday's. And sometimes a society doesn't trend a name because something happened today. It trends because it suddenly realizes the past never completely left. And maybe that's the real ending to this story. Jesse Jackson isn't trending because of tragedy. He's trending because a new generation finally found him. Not on a history test, not in a museum, but alive in conversations that still matter today. The ideas he carried didn't disappear when the marches ended. They moved forward through elections, through new leaders, and eventually into a presidency like Barack Obama. That's why this moment feels different. It's not a goodbye. It's recognition. A reminder that progress in America didn't happen in one year, one speech, or one election. It happened step by step, voice by voice, era by era. And sometimes the internet pauses, not to argue, not to react, but to acknowledge the people who helped shape the road everyone else now walks on. History didn't just pass by him. History kept moving and carried his impact with it. That's the legacy.